Welcome, everyone. This is Our Souls Speak. We're in constellation in divine space. We convene with our souls to listen, share, and explore. Our Souls Speak, a podcast where, together with our guests, we embody the soulful principles of oneness and sourceness. Welcome to this episode of Our Souls Speak. It's my honor to introduce our guest for this episode, Molly Anne Chinnor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Molly. So you are a British sound healer, devoted musician, vocalist, and founder of the Tone Temple.
Yeah.
Hailing from the enchanted landscapes of southwest England, your music weaves threads of dreamy British folk sound with your work in ambient, healing, devotional, and world music genres to offer a soulful and mystical listening journey as a celebration of sound as healing and song as a guided remembering of the earth and the language of universal love. Your signature sound waves together cosmic melodies from distant galaxies to songs from the heart of Gaia to channel your distinct and ethereal soundscapes, guiding the listener to remember our kinship to the earth and our ancestry to the stars. Welcome, Molly. Today, you've chosen to talk about light language, which really inspires me, and I wonder if that was really informed from your upbringing in the mystical southwestern shores or land of England.
That's a really interesting question. I think on a soul level, on a soul contract level, yes, I think definitely the land that has been known by many names over the years, but the land of England or the British Isles, or however it is that these lands, the dragon lines or the ley lines beneath the land are beginning to awaken now in this transition into the age of Aquarius. So being born at this transitional moment, in this moment, this shift, I feel has definitely played a part. But on like a mundane level, the southwest of England, I feel you probably all have experience in the southwest of England, is both really magical and mystical, and very rigid and quite British countryside. Magic and mysticism isn't necessarily something that is at the forefront. It's definitely there, it's bubbling, and it's ancient, and it's present if you know where to look, but it's not something that is overt in many places in the southwest of the UK. Most of the land that I grew up around is agricultural land and farmland and these big, beautiful forests. So I didn't have to look far to discover magic. And I'm really lucky to have been brought up in a family who believed in magic and mysticism and the fairies. And I had a childhood full of beautiful magic and playing in the garden and with the fairies and in the forests. I believe that the answer to that question is probably both, that being on the land itself is sometimes all that's needed for that nudge, that initiation to begin. But the environment within the southwest of England is still very much rooted in kind of like 100, 200 years ago, and can be a little rigid. So it's both.
So how did you discover that you had a voice?
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. because I started my journey with performing music live when I was about 11 years old. And I was really quite lucky in that my parents were very supportive of that sort of like lust and that want and that desire to explore the arts, the creative arts. But there was also something that was a little bit unstoppable, I think, inside me. I was not born as like a musical prodigy, which I know some children are and were blessed, you know, with like this immense skill out of the gate. And that wasn't really my journey. When I was 11, I wasn't very good. I was your typical 11-year-old. I wasn't like terrible, but just, you know, needed some training up. But there was something so deeply in me that would not let that slide. Like I couldn't not perform music and write music and play, even if I wasn't the best one in the room. And I have this kind of drive to just return to music. It's always been there. There have been a few moments in my life where I've kind of pushed it away or tried to turn away from the music, and it always comes back for me. It always comes back. And so now I'm in my 30s, I've surrendered to the fact that this is something that is intended for me, and I'm moving with that. But I was quite young when I started to sing, about 11, and I was writing songs from that point. So around 20 years now, I've been writing and performing my own music. So it's been quite a journey.
I'm wondering, you talk about that drive. How do you sense that?
That's a beautiful question. To me, it feels like something that I cannot not do. Sorry, that was terrible English. I think you know what I mean. It's something that I couldn't turn away from. And it's like a fire. It burns in, I can feel it in sort of like my upper solar plexus kind of area, a physical sensation, a fire, like an ignition, this drive. I used to be called, like one of my nicknames was tenacious when I was young, because I wouldn't ever let something go. It was like if I started something, I would just do it over and over again until I was really good at it and I couldn't let things go like that. So I think it's been just a part of my soul's evolution and my journey here on earth to be in the flow of music in that way. I don't think that I can turn away from it. I think that it's so intrinsically a part of me that I couldn't not do it, if that makes sense. Sorry, my dog's saying hello to the postman.
No, it makes total sense. And that fire and your connection to the earth, I'm assuming, informs your voice?
Yes, definitely. My music is very much inspired by the land itself, and that has always been the place that my music comes from. Until around 3 or 4 years ago, it exclusively came from the earth, and it was the immersion into the landscapes that would bring forwards that transmission of the music and of the songs that would come. And it was that way for a very long time. And if I wasn't in kinship with the land, or if I was out of alignment with the land, or I'd been in like an urban environment, so I lived in London for about 3 years, and that was quite dramatic, the impact that had on my music, because there's always nature, but it's quite lacking in London. It's hard to find those places of great beauty. They are there, but they're much harder to find. So yeah, that connection, it very much does come from the landscape. And then around 3 years ago, I started to become aware of the channel also opening in the direction of above. So up until I was about 28, then it was below. The channel was very much rooted down into the land and into the landscapes, especially the British Isles, a lot of my musical background was in fairly traditional Celtic and Brythonic folk music. So I was very rooted in the land and the music of this land. And then around 3 or 4 years ago, I just became aware of melodies beginning to arrive into my channel that felt like they were coming from above, which was a new feeling. It was something new. I was very used to the transmission coming from below, and this felt like something different. To begin with, I started to shut down that channel because I think that's something that a lot of people go through when they first become aware of their channel opening, is like that sort of like recoiling and the fear of like, oh my gosh, but all these questions. So I kind of like recoiled and tried to shut it down, but it very, very gently kind of held that experience of opening for me in a way that felt like an opening to a new aspect of my higher self. So I was very aware that this light that was coming in was an aspect of me, wasn't like another being or a different dimension. It was me, but a much higher aspect of me that was coming to kind of integrate my consciousness into this higher aspect. So it was this kind of sensing of the light and then softening into that light in surrender that allowed this channel to open. And then there was a flooding of, sometimes there were fully formed songs, sometimes there were melodies, a new language that I personally refer to as the language of light. It could potentially have many names, but the light language began to come at that moment. And it's been a journey since that point of surrendering and sinking into acceptance of this light as a part of me, as a higher aspect of me, and allowing it to come through without trying to control it through like the little mind or through the lowercase s self that's like, oh, I still want this to sound beautiful, or my music has always sounded like this and now it sounds like this and people are going to be like, what's happened? You know, all of these things that start to come, these thoughts and this process. For me, it's been a real sense of surrendering to the light and just understanding that light and that higher aspect has got a purpose for its integration into this now moment, and just trusting, you know, God's will or the divine will or whatever that, you know, the word is that feels right in your own belief system, but just trusting that divine plan and getting out of the way.
So beautiful. I'm just trying to sense it if this is the right time. Could you share a little bit of your light language with us as we transition into the group?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of my beloved crystal singing bowls with me. And the crystal bowls were such a strong part of the journey of activation, which we can touch on later. But the crystal sound really supports for anyone listening and is feeling this kind of light coming in. Crystal sound is so supportive for light language, or for this, you know, this channeling that is coming to earth, this light that is coming to earth. So I'll use the crystal bowl to support the sound. So if it feels right for you to do, you can allow the eyes to close, or you can just lower the gaze and just setting the intention to receive what is needed in this moment, maybe taking a deep breath. And just taking maybe another deep breath to welcome yourself back. Nice and slowly. Thank you for receiving.
My experience, not only of receiving the beautiful transmission, is that recognition of the ceremonies that I attend in Ecuador, and that you do is the shamans do that in their icaros, and yeah, so it's that the light connected to the ancient. Can you speak to that at all, or?
Yeah, I absolutely can. Super interesting that you talk about the shamans in Guatemala. Yeah, a conversation for another time. I've had a very strong sense of being drawn to a specific part of Guatemala now for a while. So I'm just sort of counting the nudges from spirit as they are given. So to my knowledge, and my knowledge of indigenous music isn't hugely strong, but the icaros are specific sound frequencies that are transmitted usually from the plant spirit themselves as a transmission of healing to the specific constellation of souls within that space, or to the shaman themselves. This is exactly the way that light language, in my experience, works. It's a transmission. The icaros are usually from plant spirits, but the light language is from that direct source light. And it works in exactly the same way, just opening the channel to receive. And the sounds, for me, they come through as sometimes melodies, as you heard there. It can really range, but it's usually sounded through my voice in various ways. But some people experience light language through the body, somatically moving, or hand motions, or writing, or there are many expressions, and I don't believe any of them are the correct way. They're just all perfect in their own way. But the alignment of the indigenous music and that kind of ancient wisdom that is held by the indigenous people in its pure essence of frequency as the pure healing codes, that if we allow ourselves to release and just trust what comes through, it's always in perfect alignment with what is needed in that moment.
Such a blessing, Molly. The experience of listening and feeling your channel, it was extraordinary. It was gentle and subtle, but completely unambiguous. I felt a complete lighting up, connecting. So, yeah. And I'm sure you're aware of this ethereal quality that you have, and affinity with fairies.
Yeah.
Is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel I've potentially had lives in the fairy realm in previous lives or future incarnations. Who knows, right? But I do have a strong connection and affinity with the Fae, and that was definitely something that was supported by my maternal grandmother when I was growing up, who was a Lancashire woman, and she held a lot of the ancient wisdom of these islands. She was very unassuming, and she was also quite fierce, but she just had all the kind of the herbal remedies, the old folklore. I remember once we were walking, and she lived in Cornwall, and we were walking and there were two blackthorn trees, and when they grow in the portal towards one another, and I was quite young, and I went to step across to get something through the blackthorn trees, and she grabbed me and she was like, "You must never step through the blackthorn trees when they grow in this way, or you will never come back from the fairy realm. And she scared the life out of me from that point. So I've always been very sort of, plugged into the fae. And in Ireland, they're called the Sidhe. They have a slightly different frequency in Ireland than they do in England. In England, they're much like lighter and sweeter, and in Ireland, they're more not sinister, but they're definitely more of a trickster energy in Ireland. And so, I feel such a deep connection with the land spirits, the fairies. They are the spirits of these specific islands. They're the guardians, and they've held the ancient wisdom and the magic here for thousands of years. And now, during this rising of Aquarius and the dragon lines, the ley lines are beginning to rise, and people are now returning to the sacred sites, to Stonehenge, to Avebury, to Avalon. The fairies the veils are very thin now, and we can start to reach across and connect with them and their wisdom, which is very much about the elements and working with the healing plants and the earth itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear your experience. So I was born and brought up for part of my life in Norway and rural Norway, and the whole folklore and aspect of that with the trolls and the giants. And then I was brought up in Devon and Cornwall as a young person. And I feel that reconnecting happening within me, within us. And I wonder how challenging it is for people who don't necessarily have that overt connection to where they're from or where they orientate from, and how they can connect to land and their sense of place in the absence of maybe having such a strong connection like you've had. And Greg came to the UK recently and connected with his British ancestors for the first time. And so to link that to a question, I'm sort of, what are you feeling and sensing is now possible that maybe wasn't possible before for all of us?
I think that's such a beautiful question, and something I'm so passionate about in this incarnation is bringing the wisdom of these islands back into the forefront, because for hundreds of years, I spent some time on the west coast of Ireland, and something that I was told is the English are cut off at the roots because the Irish have got very strong folk traditions that go back hundreds, thousands of years, actually. The Scottish, the Welsh, to some extent the Cornish as well, have got these super strong roots from thousands of years that have not been as interrupted. They obviously have had their interruptions, but the English are more cut off at the roots because we lost so many of our wisdom keepers during the witch trials, which wasn't that long ago. We're still feeling that generational wounding through the feminine line of that, which was really only a couple of hundred years ago, not that long. So we've been turning to the east, to various places around the world, to find these intact traditions where they still have a deep rooting and respect of the land, a deep reverence of as above, so below, the sky, the sun, the moon, this connection to the elemental spirits as well. And so my journey back into this work that I do now was really ignited when I found yoga, which is an Eastern tradition. I'm sure that you all know of yoga, right? And yoga was what really brought me to a tradition within the yoga universe, which is called Nada Yoga, the yoga of sound, which is the discipline using sound healing to create a connection with Nada Brahman, or the sound of God, the sound of the universe. And that's what has brought me to where I am now. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. And so I believe that we, in this beautiful age of stretching across borders and kinship between nations and cross-culturalism, and I think this is so beautiful, is that we can really start to become stewards of the land that we are on. I very much believe passionately that we don't own the earth, and something that is obviously going on in many places around the world today is we're fighting over territory that we don't actually have any entitlement to. No one does. And what we can instead do is think about where we are and root down into where we are and become a steward of that land. Our ancient ancestors of these lands, and I'm sure many lands around the world, received the songs, received the wisdom through the land itself. They didn't just make it up out of nowhere. It's a channel. They were channels for receiving through these power centers, the ley lines, through these beautiful big, power centers that we have all around the world. And so we can now start to do that again. We've lost a lot of wisdom in the UK. And so we can kind of fill in the blanks, I guess, a little bit with what we know. But really, we should be listening to the land itself, to the earth, and to become guardians of where we stand. And that, I think, can help that feeling of being uprooted and being lost. Say that we, live far away from where our ancestors were, then we can both have our ancestral connection to a landscape and also become a really powerful steward of where we are in respect and in reverence for the land itself. I hope that makes some sense.
It makes wonderful sense and so heartening and genuinely optimistic in relation to possibility. We were on the land at Blenheim, and we had a dear friend who's part of the Constellation, who's our first podcast guest, and we were sitting there contemplating what to do next. And she said, well, how about we ask? So there was 5, 6 of us sat there at Blenheim, feet on the ground, and her wherewithal to invoke us to ask and to ask and receive. And that feels to me how we can develop a trust within ourselves, a trust within each other, a trust of where we are, a trust of this moment. So yeah, thank you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think the land at Blenheim is also really powerful. I lived there for a little while, so there's some magic there.
I feel a real affinity of the Palladians and the music of the Palladians. I wondered, do you notice certain affinities with certain constellations, certain places?
Yeah, beautiful that you feel an affinity with the Pleiadians. I really received a strong Pleiadian light recently. It was so gentle and but powerful at the same time, this feminine healing magic. And yeah, I was just humbled by that spell. Yeah, without kind of sinking into the little story that my mind would try and create about where I'm from and all the places that I've been over my incarnations, because who really knows, right? But I feel a very strong affinity to the Syrian constellations, and there is a group of beings that have been working through many different civilizations here on Gaia for potentially hundreds of thousands of years. They're called the Hathors, and they have Syrian origins. They are master sound healers. They're also real jokers, and often they do silly things, which is really nice, because when I've encountered their energy, it feels extremely high vibration, and it can be quite overwhelming, but they come with this humility and this sense of love, that they are just in service to the expansion into the 5th dimension here on Gaia. They're doing everything that they can to remind us that we are just God experiencing itself. And so I'm looking at a picture of Hathor right now that I have behind my screen, these kind of these breadcrumbs that spirit leaves. But yeah, the Syrian light to me is very strong in my own experience, and this year's Lionsgate for me felt like a huge tidal wave of Syrian light that came in and almost felt like, couldn't quite catch my breath. And I've seen this kind of reflected in a few other people that are feeling that overwhelm as well. It's a beautiful feeling, but very strong. But just trusting that we are collectively expanding and finding our way towards this harmonic frequency of love. And so I feel very strong connection to the Syrians, and I also have a really deep affinity with the Lemurian civilization. that was here on Gaia for a long time ago now. But yeah.
Thank you. Lorna, you...
Yeah, lovely to hear all about that and to feel into that, and I was to recognize a lot of it. The Hathors I'm familiar with. I've met them a few times, prompted by the work of Tom Kenyon, and his work, which introduced me to them, and then a visit to the Dendara temple not in Egypt, but at the Met Museum in New York. But no less energetically encoded. And it's fascinating about the she. I'm very familiar with the she, having met them in Como when I lived there, and I resonate with what you say. They've told me they think of themselves as the gardeners of Earth, and I often call on them to help me with my garden. Some of them do wish to connect with us again, and some of them don't. How do you know when you are in their presence?
Thank you for that question. The answer that immediately rose in me I'm going to just share it anyway. It just bubbled up was, in my experience, I don't feel that I've ever been out of connection with them. And that could literally just be because I've grown up in a place and I was born into a place where they are everywhere, and very present on the land. So it's hard to not see them. I would also say that they are, as you said, Lorna, they're not all beautiful, benevolent beings. Some of them are quite trickster. They have a trickster energy. It's really difficult because with our human morality, it's hard for us to understand they're neither good nor bad. They are just elemental spirits. They also don't have an obligation to us in any way. A lot of their karma doesn't necessarily cross over with the karma of the third dimension, which is what we currently live in. They're fourth dimensional beings. In my opinion, that's how I've experienced them. They tend to kind of live in that fourth dimensional space. And they are literally everywhere because they are a part of the land. So that could be potentially unhelpful to anyone listening who is like, I would love to connect with the Fae or the She, because they're not all benevolent and they don't always have good intentions. But again, it's neither good nor bad. It's neutral in the way that they see the world. It's neutral, but to us, we have that morality of good and bad. And so if I could give any advice, which I feel very qualified to share any advice on the fairies, but if I could, to anyone who's very inexperienced, is to set a very strong intention to connect with the highest frequency fairies or the She, because the She is more of a term that kind of that encompasses a lot of the folk creatures in Irish mythology, whereas the Fae are specific beings. To maybe set that intention to connect with the highest frequency, with those that have intentions to help and assist humanity, and then to also put into place protection. So my grandmother would always suggest putting rings of salt around your body or around your space. You can tell when they're near because things start to go missing. They like to hide things. So you can always ask for them back. And usually if you can give them some honey or like a little bit of mead, which is a honey wine. I'm not sure if you can get that anywhere outside of the UK, but it is in some shops over here. But they particularly like honey or mead. And if you can leave them like a little bit of that, that's an offering for them. So if you start to notice things go missing or If anything is going wrong on your land, if you have got land, then making offerings to the Fae is a really nice way just to appease the spirits, because they might be upset for some reason. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent there, but I hope that's an interesting answer to your question, Lorna. I'd love to. Yeah, what you'd say.
Not at all a tangent. Not at all. I've had experiences of them leading me a dance, going for a walk, and they've decided that I needed to walk 3 miles more than I had planned. My suggestion is, when a lot of people go for walks in forests, and I have been shown by them, and I think it's maybe a different group, maybe it's the forest group, who invite you to stand in little pools of light. But walking along the path, there will be pools of light that just are absolutely like platinum, so shiny, so bright, so intense. And the invitation is always to stand in those to receive whatever the energetic transmission or gift or healing, or sometimes it's a joke, sometimes it's actually funny, whatever it is. And the other thing that I also say to people is, notice if there's a single leaf blowing, looks like it's blowing in the wind. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing else is moving, but there's one leaf is fluttering. Nearly always, but it's always a sign that they're close and willing to interact, for sure. So those are my 2 common tips. One final thing for me is, I don't know. 2 things. First thing is to suggest to our listeners, if they haven't read the book, The Emerald Modem, which explains beautifully how there are different energetic structures of the earth on the land, to look it up. It's extremely accessible. I believe you've read it many times, Barry, and it describes the energetic structures of how the earth was originally set up, and they're still there. That they haven't gone. Did you want to say something about that, Barry?
Just so many of the locations in the book are in Cornwall.
Yeah.
I mean, it locates where pretty much everything is in every single part of the world, and I'd say, almost 10% of specific location. And there's a lot on the British Isles specifically. So it's an incredible read.
Yeah, Barry and I have been to Ragged Stone Hill, which is on the edge of the Malverns, which is the umbilicus of Earth, the belly button of Earth, according to Richard Leviton. And we had quite an interesting experience there on top of Ragged Stone Hill.
Well, it connects to, Molly, what you were saying around the seeming paradox of the Southwest being highly powerful and energetically potent, and this density or this rigidness. And so that work that we were called to do on that particular piece of land was very much connected to that, which feels like a returning to what it is and what we know, and that happening through us and with us, and asking for and receiving support around that. And how, for me, the actual process of that is so powerful. It's not a one-off, it's a continuous. And I noticed with my friends that, we all seem to be migrating more and more and more to the woods, to the river, to the sea, to the mountains, talking about it, moving there, less and less heading into town. It feels like, well, I know it's a collective experience. What's most present for you right now?
In this moment? What can I feel? I feel something that's been so thematic for me personally is, and I've seen this reflected in others. I don't necessarily always like to speak to others' experience because it can differ so much, but I have seen this reflected in others. It's this idea that we are at this moment in time where I think this has been predicted for a long time, right? That we can now choose as a humanity to stay in the third dimension of consciousness into density and continue with the fear and the separation and the lack of recognition in one another. But we have got an opportunity as we speak now, is this moment. And I was reminded of this yesterday when I was walking down. I live in a place where there's a canal, and it's very beautiful in some places. The water was so crystal clear, and it was raining just a little bit, and there was a rainbow in the sky, and the oak trees are just starting to turn a little bit golden, just a tiny bit. And I was just struck by just the awe of the beauty that is available in this moment. And I had this message that I'm always feeling very connected to Lemuria. And the message was, Lemuria is not then, and it is not in the future. It is also not over there, because sometimes I think we get lost in like, where on earth was it? Was it in Polynesia? Was it in here or there? It's right here and now. It's now. And is within us. This fifth dimension of consciousness is a choice that we are able to make now. But, and I think this is the thing that has become really present for me, is that the spiritual journey that I've taken so far has begun with the earth and has moved up towards the sky, as many spiritual traditions have kind of encouraged that ascension, the looking upwards, like that perhaps God is somewhere up there. And that's been echoed through the religions as well of the world. And a message that I received recently that I've been really feeling is that those of us who have incarnated in this time have the joy of bringing that light now down and in, from the up back down. And actually, it's not all beautiful light. It's going to be quite hard. It's going to be quite painful, because we now have to feel all of it. We have to feel everything. We have to feel everything from our own karma and our own ancestral line. And the fifth dimension is available to us, but only if we all rise together. So for those of us that are awake to the idea that this is possible, we have to be willing to now feel the karma of everyone else, and to heal it, and to hold it, and to love it, and not to push it away in fear or dismay or disgust or rage or hatred and all of these things that are happening, but to feel all of it. And that's the only way to healing through the heart, is that down and in, which was a beautiful realization. But it's also this like, oh, I don't want to, because it sounds painful. But yeah, this is the way. I believe that it's a rising tide lifts all ships, that we all rise together. But we have to be willing to feel and not to bypass anymore.
All this silence and nodding and umming is just an immense felt shared resonance with everything you've said and how beautifully you've expressed it. I mean, it's been such a gift for us and a gift for everybody that will listen and has the opportunity to listen.
I'm very blessed to be able to be in this beautiful constellation with you all. So thank you.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough for being with us today.
Thank you. I've loved it.
And everyone listening is receiving many blessings.
Mm.
To receive more information about our guests and future events, please visit our website at OurSoulsSpeak.com. We are one.